Welcome to Megapath Presents. I'm Ronnie Hayes, and today we're going to talk about something that has to do with The Walking Dead comic, the main show, and also the companion show, Fear the Walking Dead. Now, first off, it's all combined, and it kind of leads into partially speculation about going beyond a crossover, but it's also a little bit of a reach. Now, I can see it going either way. The only problem is, if you are not into the Walking Dead comic, there's no way around it. There's flat out spoilers for issues up to issue 175. Now, I will speak on it with as little detail as possible, just so you need to know what you need to know if you're not caught up with the comic. So, if you're not into spoilers for the show, fear not. We were going to mention the comic, but I'm not going to go into the detail. So here it is. Recently in the new issue 175, we met up with our biggest community ever. That is the height of the spoiler that I'm going to drop in this video. So if you didn't want to know, there it is. It's like a band-aid we ripped off real fast. The biggest community so far, and they mentioned that one of the residents they took in, or one of the survivors that they've taken in, he used to live every single day by putting blood on him. Now, this is nothing new. We got flooded with comments why I didn't bring it up in the review, and it was because we're going to mention it in this video, but also, this is nothing new. In the comic, a character on a radio already said this to Eugene. This is nothing new at all. They're just repeating it. Now, I kind of feel at the time, and a little bit now, it was used because at this point in time when it's being written for the comic and coming out in the comic, the Fear the Walking Dead show is utilizing this technique with Nick, so it's fresh on the writer's mind. It's fresh on Robert Kirkman's mind. And that could be the only connecting tissue. That's it. It's just fresh on his mind, and they put it out there. There's really not much they can do in the world of The Walking Dead outside of that, because they set up specific rules and limitations with the zombies and the virus and stuff like that, and the camouflage technique. So there's not a whole lot you can do unless you want to introduce something new, like the Whispers, for example. If you want to take something new that people do, like that was a new technique that we ran into. But if they used a new technique that we haven't seen, it'll steal some of the reveal away when we find a character utilizing a new technique. So there's not much for Kirkman to use, and the blood thing is simple. Look at the survivor covers himself in blood every single day. Boom, it's a sentence or two, and it is simple as hell. Now, a lot of fans do believe this means there might be a Fear character going into the comic book, and right away I have to say, I don't know what kind of deal they worked out as far as what AMC worked out with Robert Kirkman, but if we just look at the general rules for intellectual property, Kirkman and Skybound do not own, I wouldn't imagine, rights to the Fear characters. Now, since Kirkman was a co-creator with David Erickson bringing this project to life with AMC, it's not a far stretch to think that Kirkman would ask for the ability to take one of the characters or some of the characters and intertwine them a little. Maybe there's stipulations where they can use them, but they gotta be somewhat different. Maybe the likeness has to be changed somewhat. But bottom line, if you want to keep it simple, it is two different universes, and I know it's easy to mix them up, but Fear characters do not exist, or at least before, and this doesn't hold a lot of weight now because Kirkman and gang came out and said Fear will be Fear and The Walking Dead will be The Walking Dead, and there's going to be absolutely no crossover. Well, since the ratings dropped so much, they decided to go against that and do a crossover, hopefully to pick up the ratings back again. But back in the day, Kirkman said that Fear characters simply do not exist. I believe this was in the letter hacks. They simply do not exist in the comic universe. And imagine, they wouldn't exist in the universe. Like Daryl doesn't exist in the comic universe. Same situation with the Fear characters. They are just non-existent. So as far as Fear the Walking Dead characters going into the comic book, I can't see what that even does for the comic book. Keep in mind, Fear the Walking Dead is doing so bad ratings-wise, they're doing a crossover gimmick to bolster ratings. You don't take a show that's struggling with ratings and say, oh, I'm going to throw it into the comic, hopefully it'll usher fans over there. It's kind of counterproductive. I don't think there's anything out there now that would convince me to believe that Fear characters are going into The Walking Dead. The comic book, I think it's specifically a storytelling element that was fresh on Kirkman's mind when he was writing this part of the story, and that's as simple as it gets. However, for the TV show, this is where it could get wildly, wildly different. If they wanted to go beyond a crossover, they could do something that at first I thought, it is silly as hell and it's just nonsensical. There's no reason you would want to do this. However, if done right, it could open the doors for something absolutely freaking incredible. And it is a slippery slope. You're either going to do this right, or this is going to screw the whole franchise. And this is a big deal. What am I talking about? Going beyond a crossover. Now, a crossover takes one character, Morgan, and let's insert him into the storyline, whether it's him during season 3, and this is kind of telling a prequel type story, which is looking less and less as the days go on. So let's say, for the sake of this argument, Morgan is going to, his timeline's going to take place after season 8's timeline. So Morgan will stay alive after All Out War, and he will venture away from the communities and run into our new group. Now, I don't know why they would do such a large time skip, but for the sake of this speculation, let's say that's exactly what they do. Because keep in mind, Fear the Walking Dead was supposed to be a prequel, and we noticed that they abandoned that for a number of different reasons. Storytelling wise, they decided to skip certain timelines, and now because of, or have time skips, and now because of the ratings, it does appear that they are willing to scrap whatever they need to and rush the timeline so that way these two shows can meet. If that is the case, they could possibly open the doors to have two shows with interchangeable characters. Imagine Daryl having a cameo on Fear the Walking Dead. Imagine Rick having a mini cameo, a mini story arc on Fear the Walking Dead, as well as the main show. If they're so eager to boost the ratings, guys, this is a possibility. Now, I feel like it is one of the least resorts. It's something they would say, it's their nuke, for lack of a better term. Okay, if all else fails, we can do these little mini cameo crossovers. Now, how would they do that? If we have this huge community and they link the Fear characters up to this community that we've now met in the comic, they now have the ability to have the main show, Alexandria, hours and hours away from, in theory, in this world, hours away from this big community. So when our characters venture from Alexandria, based off the storyline, to this new big community, we would run into the Fear characters, doing different, you know, whatever, different random shit. Fear characters would be kind of background and supporting characters. Sometimes they would cameo in main parts in the main show, and then vice versa. So to put it in perspective, essentially AMC would have to abandon Fear characters being on the West Coast and the Walking Dead characters being on the East Coast, and just have the Fear characters over a couple seasons venture over to close to where our characters are in the Walking Dead main show. And this way they'll have perfectly set up two shows where the characters live just hours apart, and depending on the main story, you could just simply intertwine the characters and have multiple cameos. The more I think about it, the more I'm like, somebody in an office somewhere is drooling over the money they could possibly make, or I don't know, just, oh, my head hurts. Let's get back into it. When The Walking Dead is on, you would have Fear characters cameoed and in little bits, maybe supporting roles, depending on if our characters go to the big city. And then when Fear the Walking Dead is on, you can have, and again, depending on which way the story goes, you can have our main cast cameo in Fear the Walking Dead. And how and why? Well, look at Morgan. If they're taking Morgan as the startup character for this beyond crossover idea, and they take Morgan and they plug him in with the Fear the Walking Dead characters and get them to this big community, by the time the story reaches around in a season or two and they're ready to connect the two shows, again, going beyond a crossover, you can now have two completely different shows taking place just hours apart in their world, in their geographical locations. Did I say that right? Holy shit, I think I did say that right. Just hours apart from each other. So at any point in time, depending on, you know, if they're shifting the focus of the story to the big community or if they're pulling back to Alexandria, you can just simply push characters back and forth between the shows. You can bring Alicia into the main show to interact with Carol and Maggie for a few episodes and then push her back out to Fear the Walking Dead. You can even then, in the next season of Fear the Walking Dead, you can go back and get Maggie and have her come to this big city and interacting with Alicia and the other characters from Fear the Walking Dead. You now have Negan in there, maybe a Negan and Madison moment. I mean, the possibilities are endless if we're going with this beyond crossover idea. Now keep in mind, this is heavy and huge because the idea is finish All Out War in Season 8. Then you go into Fear the Walking Dead, setting up Morgan with this group. With a big time skip, sure, but the show is on its last legs, according to some of the critics. So let's just say that they're pulling out all the stops and they're using Morgan as a bridge to connect. Then we return in Season 9 and we do the Whisperer story arc throughout Season 9, and then into Season 10, we get to this big community. That gives Fear the Walking Dead a connected introduction with Morgan and the Fear the Walking Dead characters. And then the next season after that, which would be what, Season 5 of Fear the Walking Dead, you have Morgan and group going and growing closer to this bigger community, bridging essentially the two shows. That way when they get there, when we return for the next season of the main show, you now have it set up perfectly for them to connect. Now, keep in mind, this is a bit wild and can be extremely silly, and I can imagine some people just hitting the dislike on this video just for me even talking about it because they hate the idea so damn much. I tell you right now, I do think there's some possibilities to create some epic and amazing stuff, but I can't help the corporation, AMC as a company, to not view this as some type of bullshit, and I hate bringing it up, but like a soap opera CW type of way. You know how there's those shows where it's not as good, dark, gritty, you know, realistic, they don't care about continuity, shit like that. It's just kind of like popcorn films, popcorn TV. I can see them looking at it like this, like it's a sitcom more than it is mini movies, because The Walking Dead, the reason why we fell in love with it is because it was a zombie apocalypse story, but it was filmed, created, written, and developed to be mini movies. And more it's starting to feel like it is more of a sitcom than a mini movie. Maybe a sitcom's a bad word for it, but you know what I'm saying? As we go on, I start believing more and more that they could possibly take this approach if they think it would help both shows and be beneficial for the ratings and maybe something new and different. Because keep in mind, you can still do the comic storyline for comic book fans that are afraid they would deviate from the storyline. You could still do the comic storyline, but also still intertwine the Fear the Walking Dead characters and the Walking Dead characters. I mean, it's an out there thought, but I do believe there's a possibility they could go this direction. Do I want them to at this time? No, I just don't want them to. I think it would detract too much from each individual storyline, and I think it could, or the writers put in that situation, and maybe from pressure of the fans and pressure from the ratings, I think it would be too easy to fall back on, instead of developing the story for what it needs to be, going, okay, how can we mix and match these characters? And I think that is the absolute worst way possible to write The Walking Dead. It should be mini movies. That should be the way you look at it. Mini horror survival movies. You shouldn't look at it and go, okay, what little story of the week should we develop here to have Alicia and Carol and Maggie meet up and go on a little adventure? What kind of development of the story can we do to have Negan and Madison learning from each other or on this little journey together, and who the hell knows, maybe even have a relationship together? It's just, I feel like it's too easy for that to go bad. So I'm not saying I want any of that or we should get any of that. I think there is, on any other show that I'm not, as in love with, I think that would have some outstanding, amazing potential. Keep in mind, it's kind of like the superhero shows and movies. They imagine when worlds collide on the superhero shows, that's how I don't want it to go down, because now it's not about the story, it's about mix and matching the characters. Story comes next. That is a better way to look at it. That's a clearer way that I can describe it, that I don't want it to go down like that. Not at all. So guys, you let me know your thoughts and opinions about this beyond the crossover idea. I can guarantee right now it's probably the most unique speculation on YouTube right now, and this is the very only video you will catch it in, and I honestly feel like it's not that big of a stretch. Let's just hope they don't go there. Thoughts and opinions in that comment box. I'm done talking. It's your turn.